picture yourself standing right in the middle of Oxford University.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you're just surrounded by centuries of history, towering stone spires, and like an atmosphere that is absolutely thick with ambition.
Right. It's heavy.
Exactly. It's a high-pressure, completely cutthroat environment. The maddening scramble of unavoidable competition is just everywhere you look. And right in the middle of this is a young student named Erasmus.
Okay.
And he is anxious. He is really afraid, and he's harboring the secret that feels, almost shameful in a place like Oxford. He confesses that he just simply lacks the fire in his belly to compete.
Which is, a terrifying feeling in that kind of setting.
Right. He doesn't see the thrill of it. He just feels completely out of his depth.
It's this profound sense of imposter syndrome, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it's compounded by the sheer weight of an environment that is essentially designed to weed people out.
Yeah.
He looks at the people around him and assumes he's fundamentally broken just because he doesn't possess this predatory instinct to, defeat the person sitting next to him.
And honestly, you've probably been there yourself at some point.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe it was stepping into a hyper-competitive corporate office or a grueling academic program or just trying to survive in a rapidly shifting industry.
Right, where everyone is constantly hustling.
Exactly. You look around at the people who seem to just thrive on the battle and you think, well, I'm not a natural competitor. This just isn't me.
Yeah.
So to explore that feeling, we're doing a deep dive today into a really fascinating narrative allegory. Our sources revolve around Book 1, Chapter 10 of this philosophical text that uses the story of this young student, Erasmus, and his aging mentor to completely deconstruct the psychology of competition.
Such a great framing device.
It really is. So we're going to dissect their dialogue and two specific poems they analyze. One is called Winning is Not for the Faint of Heart, and the other is Self-Reliance. Because the mission today is to explore a radical reframing of competition.
Right, looking at how winning isn't this external battle against the person next to you, but an internal war, really, to master your own spirit.
Exactly. So let's get into the mentor in this narrative, a man named Mr. Newton Payne.
Yes. So Newton Payne is an antiquarian bookshop owner, and he's a former gifted athlete and actually a fearless war hero.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but physically, in the present day of the story, he's incredibly vulnerable. He recently suffered a really bad fall.
Right.
So he navigates his bookshop leaning heavily on a shiny wooden cane. His movements are very slow, very deliberate. But when Erasmus confesses his fear of competition, Newton Payne doesn't just offer, like, a traditional pep talk.
He doesn't just say, chin up, right?
No, not at all. He recognizes the affliction immediately. He leads his anxious mentee to the back of the shop, walks up to this locked 2x2 glass box, punches in a security code, and extracts this ancient, enormous book.
Like a literal literary prescription.
Exactly, a literary prescription for the young student.
I love that. So he turns the thick pages to a specific red cord marker and just begins to read this poem, Winning is Not for the Faint of Heart. And what's wild to me is you have this frail man. His voice is likely hoarse and weak, leaning his whole weight on a wooden cane, but the words coming out of his mouth are shockingly violent.
They're incredibly intense.
Right? The text commands the reader to visualize themselves as a gladiator in the arena, or, a stealthy ninja warrior poised to strike in the shadows.
Or a bullfighter confronting the fury of the beast.
Yes. It frames winning as a literal game of survival. It explicitly says, it is war.
And the author does that deliberately, using this intense, visceral imagery to jar the reader out of complacency.
To wake them up.
Exactly. Because we are evolutionarily wired to respond to threats of physical survival. So the poem sort of hijacks that primal circuitry. It demands tunnel vision and steely resolve. It's basically asserting that victory requires a desire so profound that it literally burns inside you.
Okay, but I have to push back on that a little bit. That level of intensity might work for, like, a 5-minute physical fight in a ring. But applying gladiator imagery to a 30-year career, that seems fundamentally unsustainable.
It sounds exhausting.
Right. If winning requires us to view everyday life as this brutal war where we have to, quote, pay all our dues and burn every candle, that sounds like a guaranteed recipe for a nervous breakdown. Like,
Right.
You just cannot maintain a spike of adrenaline for decades without burning out completely.
And you're touching on the exact reason why external competition burns people out.
Yeah.
If you view the person in the next cubicle as the gladiator you have to slaughter, your nervous system is eventually going to collapse.
Absolutely.
But the text actually anticipates this. The stamina to keep going doesn't come from fighting the world. The poem urges us to learn from the fearless heroes who have already weathered life's, quote, fiercest currents.
Okay.
And Newton Payne clarifies to Erasmus that the drive for success has to be kept in its proper place. The text warns against grand illusions of wealth or fame.
So it's not about becoming a billionaire or famous.
No, winning is merely a game of life. It's an existential tool. You use it to navigate life's perils and overcome life's obstacles, rather than treating the win itself as some sacred end goal.
So the adversary isn't actually human at all. You aren't sharpening your sword to defeat the guy in the cubicle next to you. You're sharpening it to survive the tragedies that life is just inevitably going to throw at you.
Precisely. The universe is deeply indifferent to our suffering.
That's reassuring.
Well, I mean, the fierce currents of life, illness, loss, sudden economic collapse, they don't care if you're tired.
Right. They happen anyway.
Yeah, so you cultivate this aggressive gladiator mindset, not to crush your coworkers, but to develop the resilience necessary to navigate those seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
Okay, but if the adversary isn't the person next to us, all this gladiator imagery feels a bit misplaced unless the war isn't happening in the physical world at all, which points to a much deeper layer in the text.
Right, the internal battlefield.
Yeah, because before you can survive the external tragedies of life, the poem states you must first, quote, harness and tame one's very own demons. So the battlefield is entirely internal.
Yes. We are instructed to rein in a very specific cast of characters that inhabit the kingdoms of our mind and spirit.
It gives you an actual internal hit list.
It does. We have to conquer our own mountains, break down our own walls. We are commanded to annihilate pessimists, ridicule skeptics, render mute the excusers and naysayers, and exile the slouches.
Okay, let's ground this in a modern context for a second. Think of your mind as like a chaotic, crowded boardroom.
I like that analogy.
You're sitting at the head of the table trying to make a difficult decision, and in the back corner, you have the lazy sloucher who just wants to take the easy way out and avoid discomfort.
Yeah, I'll have that guy.
Right. And across from them is the loud skeptic shooting down every creative idea you have, demanding absolute certainty before you can move forward. And right next to you is the anxious intern, the naysayer, just panicking and listing all the catastrophic ways you might fail. The poem argues that true winning requires you to stand up in that boardroom, fire the sloucher, moot the intern, and literally kick the skeptic out of the building.
Because we constantly tolerate internal voices that we would never accept from an external employee or friend.
Exactly.
You have to actively govern your own internal kingdom.
Yeah.
But notice how the strategy shifts depending on the psychological archetype.
Oh, yeah, this is a huge pivot.
You annihilate the pessimist because pessimism is a definitive declaration of failure, right? It offers zero utility.
Right.
You exile the sloucher because lethargy is contagious. But the strategy for the fearful parts of your mind is completely different.
The text explicitly says we must calm the fearful, making them our allies.
Exactly. We don't exile fear, we recruit it.
And that distinction is crucial. It changes the entire paradigm of what mental toughness even means.
Yeah.
We usually think of bravery as like the absence of fear, or at least the ability to just crush fear into submission.
Right, the whole no fear mentality.
But if you destroy fear, you destroy your own internal alarm system.
Yeah, fear is simply data. It's an evolutionary mechanism designed to keep you alive. If you try to annihilate your fear, you just become reckless.
Which gets you killed in the arena.
Right. But if you calm it, if you sit down with that anxious intern in your mental boardroom and say, I hear you, I see the risk, let's look at the data and prepare for it, then fear becomes an ally. It keeps you vigilant.
It highlights the vulnerabilities in your plan.
Exactly. The goal is to let fear advise you without letting it vote.
Oh, I love that. Let it advise, not vote. But that requires an incredible amount of self-awareness. It means balancing logical analysis with emotional drive. Because the text states that while strategy is essential, quote, on any given Sunday, in the game of winning, passion generally beats brains.
Yeah, because logic and the prefrontal cortex, they're excellent at planning the battle. They can calculate risk and allocate resources.
Right.
But when you are in the middle of a crisis, when your plans just completely fall apart, logic alone will often suggest that quitting is the most rational option.
Because mathematically, the odds are against you.
Exactly. So to push through a truly agonizing obstacle, you need the limbic system to take over. You need that raw atavistic passion. You must want the victory so deeply that logic becomes secondary to the sheer will to survive.
Okay, so we have this internal hit list and this philosophy of making fear an ally. But honestly, putting this into practice is incredibly difficult, and the narrative actually acknowledges this by jumping forward in time.
Right, we get a little time jump.
Yeah, the deep dive sources take us to a university classroom where an older Professor Cromwell-Smith, who is actually that young, anxious Erasmus, now fully grown and teaching, is presenting this exact same poem to his own university students.
And this highly ambitious business major named Alice raises her hand. And she just cuts right through the poetry and asks the fundamental, practical question that the listener is probably thinking right now.
Which is, Professor, how do we actually identify these demons and how do we start to tame them?
Right. And the professor answers with what he calls the fuel formula.
A fuel formula.
Yeah. He tells Alice that our demons are actually our fears, our insecurities, and our unresolved conflicts.
Okay.
And to identify them, you have to engage in brutal introspection. You have to ask yourself with total transparency, what is holding you back and what fills you with doubt?
Okay, but wait. So once we spot them, do we just forcefully push them out of our minds? Like, I have a real problem with this framework if that's the case.
How so?
Well, telling someone to harness their darkest insecurities and unresolved conflicts to achieve success, that sounds like terrible psychological advice. Doesn't that just create miserable, highly successful people who are running on a treadmill of anxiety?
Yeah.
Like, using trauma as fuel just seems fundamentally toxic.
And it absolutely would be toxic if the formula was simply stay traumatized and work harder.
Right.
But the professor is pointing to a specific, really well-documented psychological mechanism called cognitive reappraisal. The brilliant part here is that taming them is not about eliminating them.
Because you can't just surgically remove a part of your psychological makeup.
Exactly. The professor instructs Alice to acknowledge their presence, understand their origins, and then channel that energy into productive action. Because physiologically, the state of fear or anxiety, the elevated heart rate, the shallow breathing, the cortisol spike.
Yeah, the physical panic.
Right. It is almost identical to the physiological state of excitement.
Oh, wow.
The body doesn't actually know the difference. It's the brain that assigns the label.
So you're intercepting the physical sensation before it becomes a negative emotion.
Exactly. You're taking the raw biological energy of an insecurity and changing the cognitive label. So instead of saying, I am terrified, I am not smart enough, you say, I am hyper-aroused because I have something to prove.
Oh, that's fascinating. So you don't suppress the energy, you just redirect it.
Think of it like a controlled burn in a forest. If you let a fire run wild, it destroys the ecosystem. That's unchecked anxiety. But forest rangers intentionally start controlled burns to clear out deadwood and trigger new growth. The fuel formula is a controlled burn of your insecurities. You are using the heat of your unresolved conflicts to power your ambitions without letting them burn down your mental health.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. You aren't trying to achieve a state of permanent calm, which is impossible anyway. You're taking the most chaotic parts of your mind and forcing them to work for you.
Yes.
So once you manage this, once you govern the boardroom, recruit your fears, and execute this controlled burn, what kind of person do you actually become?
That's the real question.
And the narrative answers this by taking us back to the bookshop with Mr. Newton Payne. He turns the page to a second poem to complete young Erasmus's lesson, and this one is titled Self-Reliance.
And this poem really defines the ultimate goal of the internal war, which is becoming a wholesome life warrior.
A wholesome life warrior. And the text describes this warrior as a doer and a maker. It requires a radical form of self-assertiveness. It demands that you are accountable first and foremost to yourself. Like, you have to trust your instincts and your gut feelings above external norms or rules or just the general influence of society.
Because self-reliance is the armor you wear after you have won the internal war.
Yeah.
When you no longer have skeptics and naysayers screaming in your own mind, you suddenly become immune to the skeptics and naysayers out in the world.
You're untouchable.
In a way, yeah. You break free from the chains of conformism and indoctrination because your identity is anchored internally. You just no longer need society to tell you who you are or what you're capable of.
But this introduces a pretty massive paradox, and Erasmus actually asks his mentor a vital clarifying question here.
Yeah, he does.
He essentially asks, well, if relying only on myself is the goal, does that mean I shouldn't care about other people? Like, does becoming a self-reliant warrior just turn you into an isolated, selfish island?
And it is such a common misconception that self-reliance equals selfishness.
Right.
But Newton Payne corrects Erasmus with a knowing smile. He explains that depending on yourself first is the exact foundation that allows you to be fully dedicated to helping others in need.
Really? How does that work?
Well, in psychology, this relates to the concept of differentiation.
Yeah.
If you lack a strong internal sense of self, you end up relying on other people for emotional regulation.
Oh, I see.
You use your relationships to validate your worth or calm your fears.
So you essentially become a drain on the people around you. Your relationships are built on dependency, masquerading as connection.
Exactly. But if your strength comes entirely from within, you interact with the world from a place of abundance rather than scarcity.
Because your cup is already full.
Right. When you help someone, you're giving freely, not taking validation in return. You can put others before yourself out of genuine generosity, not because you need them to prop up a fragile ego. So strong collaborations, healthy marriages, and really effective leadership, they're all built on this foundation of mutual respect and independence.
That is incredibly profound. And Newton Payne brings the entire lesson home for the anxious young student standing in his bookshop. He tells Erasmus not to expect anything to be handed to him.
Right, he must earn his place.
But the ultimate realization is that the competition at Oxford, that maddening scramble for grades and status that was terrifying him, is just noise. The real competition is against your own limitations.
Yes. The attitude of a winner, that relentless, self-reliant, demon-taming drive, is just the armor required to survive the chaos of existence. It's about developing an indomitable desire to triumph over circumstances, not over your peers.
That's the true wisdom of the wholesome life warrior.
Absolutely.
So we started this journey with a panicked young man, completely overwhelmed by the external pressures of a cutthroat university, feeling like he lacked the natural predatory instinct to survive.
Which is such a relatable place to start.
It really is. But through the intervention of a frail war hero and the profound philosophy hidden in these two ancient poems, we arrive at an incredibly empowering realization. The external world will always be chaotic, right? And there will always be someone faster, smarter, or more aggressive than you. But the only kingdom you actually need to conquer is the one between your ears.
And what remains truly poignant to me is the physical reality of the mentor, Mr. Newton Payne. Throughout all of this,
Right.
you have this aging man, his voice is weak and hoarse, he's leaning heavily on a cane due to a recent fall. Yet he is the one reading verses about gladiators, ninjas, and steely resolve. It's a stunning visual that completely redefines strength.
It strips away the illusion that power is purely physical.
Exactly. A healthy body can be broken by a simple fall. Physical prowess is fleeting, it's fragile, but an indomitable spirit, a mind that has learned to execute a controlled burn of its own fears, that has tamed its demons and cultivated true self-reliance, that is unshakable. The road to victory doesn't start in an arena or a university or a corporate boardroom. It starts entirely within.
It's all about the internal kingdom. Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If your fiercest enemies and your greatest allies both live inside your own mind, wait, which one is currently sitting at the head of the table in your internal boardroom today?